like to thank Indian Women Scientist Association for giving me this opportunity to present my work, which I had carried out in Antarctica for today's IWSA talk. So let me move on with my presentation. So the topic for today is footprints on the frozen continent, my Antarctic journey and the unseen impact of plastic. So let me just introduce myself before starting or before moving on to the presentation. My name is Femi Anna Thomas. I'm working as an assistant professor in the Department of Zoology at Union Christian College, Aluva. I'm basically a microbiologist and my specialization is polar microbiology. I did my bachelor's in zoology from Women's Christian College, Chennai, master's in marine biology from Cochin University of Science and Technology, and PhD I have carried out at Goa University and worked at National Center for Polar and Ocean Research. So my area of interest was bacterial diversity and metal bacterial interactions in glacier and marine environments of Arctic. So for my PhD, I had an opportunity, a wonderful opportunity to go to Arctic in order to collect my samples for my PhD work. So once I joined UC College, I had submitted a project to the Ministry of Earth Sciences asking for a proposal, meaning a project funding to work in Antarctica. And my project got sanctioned. And 2024, I was able to go to Antarctica representing India in the 44th Indian Scientific Expedition to Antarctica. So that's all about me. Let me now move on to the presentation. So the first thing itself, when we think about Antarctica or the polar regions, the first image, everybody will have an image in their mind, right? So it can be either ice melting or glaciers, penguins, seals, whales. There are a lot of images that comes to everyone's mind. I think the most common image would be ice, vast extents of ice, right? So the first question I would like to pose is why studying Antarctica is important for all of us. We all know Antarctica is in the southernmost part of the world, and it is more than a frozen wilderness. So it's actually a natural laboratory when we think about it. And understanding Antarctica and studying Antarctica is very important because it is very important to understand the climate change that we are facing today. Because about 70% of the world's freshwater is found in Antarctica. So if there is something happening to Antarctica, the continent Antarctica, it can have an implication on the Earth's climate altogether. Okay, and Antarctica is about 4 kilometer, having about 4 kilometer thick ice. Okay, so if we are able to study the ice cores from Antarctica, we get to understand the past, what has happened in the past. So all those informations we can study by studying the ice cores present in Antarctica. And like we know, there are such unique and beautiful species which we can only find in Antarctica, and the best being the penguins. So also we know that with the current global warming scenario, it can have a repercussion on Antarctica because the Antarctic sea ice or ice sheet will start melting. And it might be a very important contributor to the sea level rise, which again can affect the coastal communities and have an impact on the global climate altogether. And research in Antarctica is also very important, especially pertaining to the research in medicine, robotics, satellite, etc. And also, they actually store a lot of renewable energy resources, and studying such areas, such pristine areas, is very important. And I must tell you, Antarctica is the only part of the world where there is a global cooperation, and it's kind of a symbol of peace because currently there are about 55 nations doing research in Antarctica, and it's kind of a forum for international collaboration, all working together for a sustainable future. So studying Antarctica is very important. And just few basic things about the polar regions altogether. Polar regions, basically they act as the cooling chambers or refrigerators for our planet. So basically they cool our planet. How is the question? So basically what happens is that we know Antarctica is completely covered with ice, and ice has got an excellent property called as albedo effect. That means ice has a property of reflecting more than 50 to 90 percentage of the light and heat that falls on the ice. So most of the light and the heat that falls on the ice get reflected back to the atmosphere. So it try to keep our planet cool. But what happens if this ice start to melt? So when the melting happens, instead of ice, there would be water. Water has a property, instead of reflecting most of the light and heat, what does the water do? Water will try to absorb more heat and light. So that means water has got a very low albedo and it actually absorbs a lot of heat and light. As the water absorbs more sunlight and more heat, more and more areas of ice will start to melt. So this particular property or process is called as amplification, and it's called as polar amplification, because of which there would be more and more melting that is happening in the polar regions. And another important part is that these polar regions have got frozen soil, which we call as permafrost. And these permafrost has got layers of soil which are completely frozen. And it is estimated to have about 1,400 to 1,600 gigatons of organic carbon stored in these permafrost. So imagine the frozen soil, because of the climate warming, if these frozen soil will start to melt, what can happen? It will release a large amount of carbon dioxide as well as methane gas, which again can result in more and more global warming and which can increase the global temperature. So, conserving or protecting the permafrost is also very important. And like I said before, polar regions, they are home for amazing animals. Both Arctic as well as Antarctica is home to unique animals. And since we are focusing on Antarctica, there are leopard seals, emperor penguins. There are like different species of penguins.
One minute, Femi.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you showing any slides?
Yes. Is it not moving?
No, we are not seeing any slides.
Oh. I think I have not. Can you see the slide now?
Now
yes,
we can see.
Yes, now it is visible.
Okay, okay. I thought I shared the slides. My apologies.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah. So like I said, studying Antarctica is very important. And Antarctica is basically a home to a large number of unique species, including the leopard seals, emperor penguins, Adelie penguins, etc. And now moving on to why it is very important for a tropical country like India to do research in Antarctica, and where do we stand in terms of Antarctic research? So India has an institute under the Ministry of Earth Sciences, which is called as National Center for Polar and Ocean Research, which is located in Goa. And this institute acts as the nodal agency for carrying out research in the polar regions, both Arctic and Antarctica. So just to give a glimpse about the Antarctic expeditions, the first Antarctic expedition happened in the year 1981, and it was led by Dr. S.Z. Qasim. So the first team went to Antarctica from India in the year 1981, and that was kind of one great moment for all the Indians. And following which, in the year 1983, the Indian expeditioners started building the first Indian station, which is called as Dakshin Gangotri. And by the year 1984, the building was completed. The first station was made. But what happened was, because of the snowfall and blizzards and everything, by the year 1988, Dakshin Gangotri was completely buried under ice and snow. So the government has to decommission this particular station. So by 1990, Dakshin Gangotri became completely, non-existent, because it was completely buried under the snow. So in the year 1989, the Indian expedition members, they were able to make the second station, which is called as Maitri. So it is still functioning in the West Antarctica. And in 2012, another new station was built, which is called as Bharati, which is located in the East Antarctica. So right now in India, India is having two functional, fully operational stations in Antarctica. One is called as Maitri and the other one is called as Bharati. Maitri is in the West Antarctica and Bharati is in the East Antarctica. So like I said, Indian researchers, the scientific team that goes to Antarctica, they undertake a lot of different, scientific research activities. One being looking at the different organisms in the ocean as well as the Antarctic continent, starting from the microorganisms, moving on to the fishes, whales, seals, etc., and trying to understand how the nutrients are getting recycled, or how the biogeochemical cycling is happening within the ecosystem. So one important study is looking at the biogeochemistry of the polar regions and trying to understand the nutrient remineralization within the system. So this is very important because it will give us an outlook on the ecosystem dynamics basically. And another important studying is ice core studies. So like I said, Antarctica is a continent which has about 4 kilometer thick ice. Okay. So, and it is a very important component because we'll be able to understand the past by looking into these ice records. So what the scientist does is that the team will go and drill ice cores. So they will drill into this 4 kilometer thick ice, and finally they'll get a cylindrical ice core. So this particular structure is called as ice core. And what they do is that they cut this ice cores into different sections and look at the water molecules and the air trapped in the ice in different sections. So each section will be corresponding to one particular time interval where that snow has fallen, resulting in the formation of ice. So in that way, they'll be able to understand what has happened in the past. What was the past temperature? What was the past carbon dioxide concentration, etc. And this can age, or this can go back up to like 10,000 to 20,000 to 50,000 years of records, which are stored in the Antarctic ice sheets. So this is very important field of study, which we call as paleoclimate studies or paleoceanography studies. Similarly, in the ocean also similar studies are being carried out, which is called as the sediment core studies. So similar to the ice cores that are being drilled from the sea ice or from the Antarctic ice sheets, what the expedition members do when they are in the ocean surrounding the Antarctica, what they do is that they again have a drilling equipment which has been deployed into the ocean bottom. And from the ocean bottom, this drilling machine that will actually take the sediment core. So the ocean mud would be taken, and this sediment core would be again sectioned into different sections. And what they look into is the organisms that are present in each of the different sections. So basically, these sediment will have certain microorganisms which are already dead, but their shells would be present in these sediment at different sections. So shells like calcium carbonate shells, silica shells, etc. would be present in each of the different sections. And looking and studying at the different organisms, we can study about the past, because each of the organism would be specialized to survive at one particular temperature or one particular pH. So looking at which species is more abundant, we would be able to understand what was the temperature in the past. So the sediment core studies can even tell us, what has happened a million years ago in our Earth. So these are some very important studies when we are looking at the Antarctic studies altogether. So these are called as the paleoclimate records from Antarctic ice sheets or from the ocean. So these are the microscopic organisms I was talking about, which is called as foraminifera. They have got calcium carbonate shells, and like you can see, these are shells of different foraminifera species. So each of the species would be specifically growing at one particular temperature or pH. So by looking at the abundance of these different species from the segments or from the sections of the sediment core, the scientists would be able to understand what was the past temperature or the pH of the ocean. So these are kind of excellent bioindicators or indicators of the environmental conditions, and talks about the past. So these are some of the studies. And another important aspect of Antarctic studies is the Antarctic ground stations by our ISRO. So the ISRO team has got Earth observation satellites in Antarctica near to the Bharati station, and this has been commissioned in August 2013. And scientists from ISRO go to Antarctica every year, stay there for a whole year, and get the satellite records from there. So this is a very important research being undertaken by the ISRO. And of course, there are studies on the aurora, the southern lights and the northern lights, etc. So there are space studies carried out from India. And there are also physical oceanographers, basically the scientists who are looking at the physics of the ocean. So what they do is that they use certain instruments called as remotely operated underwater vehicles or gliders, which they deploy into the water and look at what is present in the ocean bottom. So basically we'll be able to understand what is the ocean bottom consisting of, what are the different organisms present in the ocean bottom. And gliders, you can see to my right, these are the rocket like instruments are called as gliders, which they will deploy into the ocean, and they will record the temperature, pH profiles for every 1 meter depth of the ocean. So this is very important. So these physical oceanographers, they carry out such observations, trying to understand what is the physics of the ocean surrounding the Antarctica. And there are also people like us who look into the microbes from the Antarctic waters. So basically, the microorganisms which are surviving in these extreme environments, they have certain special properties. First itself, they are all cold adapted. So there are bacteria, fungi, algae, they are having a lot of adaptations to withstand the extreme cold conditions in Antarctica. So it is very important to look into such microorganisms having a lot of adaptations and adaptive properties, and they are also very good indicators of climate change. And many of the biotechnological applications, we can use the enzymes and antifreeze proteins from such microorganisms. And in the recent years, there are a lot of genome related studies trying to understand what is the diversity of microorganisms and bacteria from the different Antarctic ecosystems, thereby trying to understand how they act as indicators for climate change. So like I said, I basically look into the bacterial community in different Antarctic ecosystems. So this bacteria, it's not like when we talk about bacteria, we all think about the pathogens that attack us, right? But the bacteria mostly found in Antarctic or the polar regions, they are very sweet. They can withstand extreme cold. They can withstand the extreme UV radiations, pH fluctuations. And these Antarctic environments, they all have low nutrient conditions. So these bacteria are able to survive at such extreme and low nutrient conditions also. And like I said, they play a very important role in the nutrient remineralization because they form the basic of the food chain. So they actually do a lot of nutrient remineralization by degrading the organic matter that is present in the ecosystem. And they also produce cold active enzymes and antifreeze proteins in order to survive the extreme conditions. And some of them, they even have capabilities to transform or degrade the environmental contaminants, which include the heavy metals or plastics, which we will be talking about. So they play a very important role in bioremediation as well. Okay, so now another important area of study in Antarctica is looking into the pollution. So we call Antarctica as a pristine, continent, but it is not pristine anymore because whatever we do here in the tropics or in the rest part of the world is affecting Antarctica also. Antarctica is not immune to pollution. It is having the impact of, or the footprints of humans are found also in Antarctica. So basically the different sources of pollution basically includes the tourism, research activities, fishing and shipping, global transportation, etc. And another important is all the scientific stations which are located there. But mostly the scientific stations make sure the wastes are not disposed into the Antarctic environments, but also to an extent, maybe a very small extent, they also contribute to the pollution, I must say. And these pollutants are being carried to Antarctica by the wind, by ocean currents, or atmospheric circulation. And from every nook and corner of the globe, whatever pollution we cause finally end up in Antarctica. Okay, and the different pollutants that reach Antarctica include plastic pollution, plastic pollutants, chemicals like persistent organic pollutants, pesticides, heavy metals, etc., and also oil from the oil spill. So all these pollutant markers reach into the Antarctica, and there are a lot of reports about each of like heavy metal being recorded from different Antarctic ecosystems, or plastic, microplastic being recorded from different Antarctic ecosystems. So coming to a very important source of pollution, that is the plastic. We know that plastic is kind of a global menace. Every year about 400, more than 400 million tons of plastic is produced annually. And of this 400, more than 400 million tons of plastic that is produced, 50% is just a single use plastic. So we use it once and we throw it. We don't know where it finally ends up. It finally ends up into our oceans. And by 2050, if this is going on like this, there could be more plastic in the oceans than the fishes in the oceans. And very sad part is that less than 10% of plastic is recycled globally. So this is kind of a very alarming situation, and this can have serious repercussions on the wildlife, and it can also have an impact on the human health, because these plastic finally end up into our body as we consume the different organisms like fishes or something. Because every fish, a very alarming fact is that one in every three fish that we catch has got microplastics present in their body. So when I talk about plastic pollution, I just want to give a brief on how the plastics start to, come into existence in the world. So it's very funny to know that plastic, the word plastic itself means pliable to polymers. So basically, the word itself indicate that it can be easily shaped. So the history of plastic is that earlier the most of the materials which were used as bags, carry bags, etc., were made from elephant tusk or tortoise shell. So in order to avoid such a situation, there were some contests being conducted in order to save the wildlife. So in 1869, John Wesley, a person called John Wesley, he created the first human made plastic, which is celluloid. And in later, the fully synthetic plastic was made in 1907 by Leo Baekeland, which was called as Bakelite. So this was durable, heat resistant, and can be easily molded into any shape. So this was kind of a substitute for the ivory or for the tortoise shell. So this was made initially in order to save the wildlife. So that's the irony of the plastic. So later on, what happened was, after the World War II, military needed more military equipments, war related equipment. So they started using a lot of nylon and plexiglass and all that. And about 300% of surge in the US plastic production happened. And post World War, what happened was a lot of industries started coming up, and they replaced the traditional steel, paper, and wood with the easily available source, that is plastic. And plastic, more than 90% of plastic is being made from the fossil fuels. So during that time, it was very cheap. So a lot of single use packaging items were made from the plastic. So by 1960s, plastic meant cheap or fake. And by 1960s, we started recording plastic in the ocean debris. So this was the history of plastic. So like I said, over 1 in 3 fish that is caught for human consumption contains plastic in the body. And it's very alarming to note that more than 95 or 98% of plastic is made from fossil fuels. And when we burn, or when we produce 1 ton of plastic, 2.5 tons of carbon dioxide is generated from that. So what are the impacts on the environment, especially on the oceans? Every year, 19 to 23 million tons of plastic waste is being leaked into the aquatic ecosystem. And when we equate this, it is about 2,000 garbage trucks of plastic being dumped into our rivers, our lakes, our oceans every day. So this is a very alarming situation. And when we talk about marine debris, plastic make up to about 80% of all the studied marine debris. And over 1 lakh marine mammals and 1 million seabirds are killed annually due to these marine plastic pollution. So this is the alarming trend of plastic which we are facing today. And these are some of the offenders, world's worst offenders. And I'm sure most of us use at least some of these products like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Nestle, etc. And look at the amount, or million tons of plastic they produce every year. So this is actually alarming. This is a report by the Forbes. And when we think about how long these plastic materials, different plastics, are going to last, starting from balloons, which last for about 6 months, to plastic bottles, which we use, almost in our daily life. For 50 years, the impact of plastic bottles will remain on the earth. So that's the alarming fact. And finally, most of these plastic end up into the ocean. And the marine plastic pollution is a transboundary problem. So whatever pollution or whatever plastic we generate here in India, it doesn't remain to the Arabian Sea or Bay of Bengal. It can finally reach to all the oceans around the world. And here comes a very important aspect of plastic, which is called as microplastic. So, like the term indicates, micro means particles, plastic particles, which are of very smaller size, smaller than 5 millimeters in size. So that's why they are called as microplastics. So microplastic can be of two types: primary as well as secondary. Primary microplastics, they are mainly manufactured in the small forms, like the micro beads that we use in the face washes or cosmetic items, or synthetic clothing fibers, vehicle tire particles, plastic pellets. All these are primary microplastics. There are also secondary microplastics, which are formed by the breakdown of the large plastic particles, either due to the solar UV radiation, or finally, once these plastic reach into the oceans, the ocean wave or tide will have a mechanical action on the plastic, and finally they get fragmented, or maybe due to a chemical impact or some of the biological impact by the microorganisms present in the ocean. So these are the secondary microplastics, which are formed by the breakdown of the primary microplastics, or formed by the breakdown of the large plastic particles. So what happens is that right now, the world ocean contains about 171 trillion microplastic particles. So it accounts to about 2.3 million metric tons in weight. Okay. And finally, about 14 million metric tons of microplastics end up in the global ocean floor. So this is again very alarming to know. And when we look into the microplastics from the oceans, about 35% of the microplastic come from the synthetic textile industry, 28% from car tires. Then there are also city dust, marine coatings, our personal care products, all contributing to the microplastics that finally ends up in the ocean. So when we come to the Antarctic part, the plastic pollution does not stop into our nearby oceans. It finally reach into the pristine polar ecosystems. So what begins as a local waste, it becomes a global environmental burden. Poles are also not isolated from our actions, and there are reports of microplastics from Antarctic snow. So there are about 73 to over 3,000 microplastic particles reported from the Antarctic snow. And also, this is kind of a record from a recent study, which indicates, you can see this is the ocean that is surrounding Antarctica. So the yellow indicates all the macroplastic particles that were reported from the Southern Ocean, which is surrounding Antarctica. And the green indicates the microplastic records from the Southern Ocean surrounding the Antarctica. So you can see from all around Antarctica, the ocean has microplastic particles, which is being recorded by different studies. And this is a typical food web of how microplastics pass through the different organisms. So starting from the microorganisms to the zooplanktons, to the jellyfish, or to the fishes, finally reaching to the marine birds, and to the mammals, and finally ending up into humans. So this is a typical food web. And marine organisms, what happens is that they sometimes mistake these plastic particles for food. And once these plastic particles, either macroplastic particles or the microplastic particles, once it enters into their body, it can cause blockage problems, it can cause irritation, starvation risk, also sometimes reduces the fertility, and also can affect the total growth of the organism. And sometimes these plastic particles, they also carry toxic metals or bacteria or virus on their surface, which interesting to see that microplastic have been recorded even from the penguin scat or penguin shit. So that's kind of the sad part. The penguins, which are found in the extreme southern most continent of the world, it has shit. So that's very sad to know. And a very important aspect when I was doing the research from my Antarctic samples was looking into these microplastic particles. So once the plastics start to degrade or fragment and become the microplastic, so these, like I said, they are particles of size less than 5 millimeter. And these microplastic particles, their surface will have certain nutrients and particles from the oceans getting deposited onto their surface. And finally what happens is that because of the presence of the nutrients on the surface of the microplastics, a lot of microorganisms including bacteria and fungi and all start colonizing this microplastic surface. So they form a biofilm on the surface of the microplastics. Okay, so finally a lot more microorganisms will get attracted to these biofilm, and it forms like a home or an ecosystem to different species. Okay, so it is kind of called as plastisphere. Okay, so the niche that is formed on the surface of the microplastics where a lot of microorganisms start to live and grow. So this is called as plastisphere, and this plastisphere will have different microorganisms which have got pathogenic properties, having antimicrobial resistance, which can resist the metals. And sometimes some of the plastisphere organisms even have the property to degrade the microplastics. So this was an important aspect which I wanted to look into, especially from different Antarctic ecosystems. So being a microbiologist, I collected samples from different ecosystems and tried to understand which are the different organisms, microorganisms present in the different samples, and what are the functions they perform. And one question was, can they degrade or destroy the plastic that is found? Okay, so basically what I do, I collect the samples, I isolate the pure bacteria. So as you can see, there are different colored bacteria that is being isolated from the Antarctic samples. And then I do culturing in the lab, as well as a molecular based approach where I do the DNA extraction, trying to understand the different properties, and then finally sequence in order to understand what is the taxonomic identity of the bacteria. Also, we directly extract the DNA from the environmental sample and trying to understand the genome analysis of the DNA, looking at what is the total community that is present from the environment. So this is all about my work, and I would want to take you to Antarctica, not through my videos which I have taken during my whole expedition. So I'll just play the video for you. Can you see my slide? Hello?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so I'll be just playing the video.
Oh,
Is it in full screen right now?
no. Now
Is it
it
in?
is.
Yeah.
Yes. But there is no
So we
sound.
started our expedition in the year 2024 to Antarctica, and the expedition started from Goa, and our first stop was Cape Town in South Africa, and from there we boarded the ship to go to Antarctica. So this was our ship, which was called as Vasily Golovnin. It is a Russian vessel. So this is the inside of the ship. It is a very huge ship, like 167-meter long ship, and it has got 5 stories. So this is the inside of the ship, how it looks like. This is a view from our deck when we were traveling. So we started our expedition from 35 degrees south in from Cape Town, and this was almost reaching to 60 degree. You can see how the water start to have ice formation. So this is when we were reaching to 65 degrees south in the ship.
Can we ask you a question while you're showing the video?
We started by the first week of January, and we reached to Antarctica. We reached to about 69 degrees south to the East Antarctica by the end of January. We were lucky enough to celebrate the 2025 Republic Day on the vessel, and this was our crew, having 24 members. So these are some glimpses from my sampling, how I used to collect the samples. So we were able to also see some of the, marine organisms. So this was a humpback whale, which was caught during the voyage. So when we were almost reaching to East Antarctica, we were welcomed by the cute Adelie penguins. There were a lot of Adelie penguins there. So this is when we reached to Bharati, near to the Bharati station. So our ship cannot directly reach to the Bharati station because of the icebergs. So our ship has got two helicopters, a very huge one which is called as Camo, and a small one which is called as Curil. So these helicopters will carry the researchers and all the required items which will move to the Bharati station from the vessel. So this is a small helicopter, and it can take about 3 to 4 researchers at a time, while the bigger one can take about 15 members. So this is a view from the heli when we were going from the ship to the Bharti. Like I said, we reached in February, so that was kind of the summer time in Antarctica. So that's why you can see a lot of melting. So these are all the frozen lakes you can see, like the small puddle sort. These are all the frozen lakes. And those white globes are the ISRO's ground station near to the Bharti. So this is the magnificent Bharti station that is located in East Antarctica. So this was a glimpse during one of my sampling. So the helicopter dropped us to one particular island in order to collect the water sample. And that time, one cute Adelie penguin was following us all throughout the day. This was a view from the sampling of the lakes, Antarctic lakes. So I used to collect the water as well as the nearby, the coastal sediment samples. It was very difficult to collect the samples because most of the lake path is frozen. So we'll have to break some areas in order to collect the sediment and soil. Bharti has got such wonderful labs where we can do the work. So we had about 15 to 20 days to work in Bharti station doing different sort of research activities. And this is a beautiful view of Aurora from the ship as well as one from the Bharti. So this is a view from Maitri. And that's all.